Today I'm reviewing The Ultimate Legacy, a movie about a self-absorbed young man who gets challenged to grow a conscience and change his ways in order to receive an inheritance. Spoiler alert. This movie starts with Miss Sally Anderson taking a trip to the law firm in order to make final arrangements. Miss Sally has less than a month to live due to some health complications. Her wish is to have Joey, her grandson and only remaining relative, inherit Anderson House legacy. Her lawyer, on the other hand, Mr. Hamilton, is opposed to this idea, but still promised to make this legally binding. In the next scene, Miss Sally passes on. Arrangements for the burial are made. Joey is having a good time with his friends when Kiel delivers the news. Joey wonders why he didn't get any messages. That's when Kiel informs him that his cell phone has been disconnected. In the next scene, there is a legal meeting happening. Mr. Hamilton and Miss Hastings are discussing details on how to execute Miss Sally's will. This execution is handed over to Miss Kelly James, one of the lawyers, Mr. Jason Stevens, and Angelica Hamilton. Now, after the burial was held, the meeting between the lawyers and Joey had to be held, and the legal obligations are laid out for Joey. Realizing he has inherited nothing, Joey storms out of this meeting to make arrangements to leave Anderson House immediately. In the process, he finds out his credit cards have been cancelled. Enraged, he goes to his room and decides to blast the whole house with loud music. Later on, Mr. Stevens, Kelly, and Angelica go to Joey's room to try reasoning with him. Joey demands an explanation to what is going on. Angelica informs him that he will receive his inheritance if and only if he meets all the stipulations in this contract, handing him the contract. Angelica continues to inform him of the mandated one-year residence in the Anderson house. A few more obligations were included in what he will be doing while he's at the Anderson house. All activities are to be overseen by Mr. Stevens. But before all this happened, Joey had $5 million in his trust fund, which he didn't have anymore. He inquires of that money. The lawyers informs him that it was removed at the passing of Miss Sally. Joey tells the lawyers what if he still wants nothing to do with Anderson House after staying here for one year. They inform him that if that happens, he will be given $5 million and the rest of the legacy of Anderson House will be placed in an irrevocable charity. Realizing that the $5 million he'll be getting is literally the $5 million he had before this began, the lawyers inform him that if he wants to get out of this, all he has to do is sign the contract. Joey thought of signing this contract as a way of him to get his freedom back. The next day during breakfast at the Anderson house, Gus asked Mr. Stevens for the next thing on the agenda. Mr. Stevens informs them about the memorial garden Joey will be building with the help of Gus in memory of Miss Sally. This activity was to satisfy the gift of work. Mr. Stevens, Gus, and Joey set off to start the work on the memorial garden. At the side, Gus illustrates to Joey how the garden should look like. Joey asks if they have an actual plan or whether they are making this up as they go along. Mr. Stevens informed him the plan is in the truck. Joey had a look at the plan and right away informed them it's not right. Gus was not so pleased with Joey putting down his plans, which were designed by the best landscape architects in Texas. Joey inquires whether the architect physically inspected the site, which turns out he didn't. To settle this, Mr. Stevens strikes a deal with Joey. He tells him to tell them what's wrong with the plan, and in turn, Mr. Stevens will answer some of Joey's questions. To this, Joey agreed. He broke down all the errors of the plan and how they can have them fixed with a new design. Later on, Mr. Stevens gets to have dinner with Joey to answer some of his questions. While they are having this dinner, Joey asks for the actual notebook Miss Sally wrote as her will. On their way back, Joey insisted Miss Sally and Jason's grandfather, Mr. Stevens, were probably closer behind closed doors. This almost earned him a beating from Jason Stevens, who got so furious. But in the end, they had a heart-to-heart conversation where Joey explained his miserable childhood and how everyone who was supposed to love him instead gave their life to the bottle and everything else besides him, informing Mr. Stevens that anger he feels right now is exactly how he lived every day of his life at the Anderson house. At the party, Mr. Stevens handed Joey a credit card he will be using for the Memorial Garden expenses. The next day, Joey works out deals with contractors and service providers for the materials he will need to build the Memorial Garden in exchange for a night at the Anderson house. In this, he was able to get everything he needs for the work to be done and all the services to be rendered to him. During this time, Joey and Kelly start to get comfortable with each other. Kelly donates a tree to Joey's work. Joey's plan works out really well, and finally all the work was complete. Joey takes a moment to enjoy the memorial garden that he has built for his grandmother and hopes that she really gets to enjoy it. Later on that night, Joey returns the credit card to Jason, informing him that he didn't have to use any money from it. Jason inquired how he got by with the expenses, and Joey explained how he offered a night at the Anderson house in exchange for all the help he received to construct the memorial garden. Joey asks Mr. Stevens how the memorial garden measures up to the fence he built at Gus's ranch. Mr. Stevens, who had never shared this information with him, asks him how he knew about this. Joey tells him he knows everything that is in this house and took him to the room where he was playing the video recordings of the late Mr. Stevens from The Ultimate Gift, showing all Jason Stevens had to accomplish before receiving his inheritance. They talked a bit, and Mr. Stevens asked Joey how his father died. It turns out his father committed suicide after Joey's mother's death. Joey's father could not understand why he was unable to save his wife despite having all the money. But taking his own life was a blow to Joey, who was only a child by the time. Later that night, Mr. Stevens visits the memorial garden with Gus. Gus admits this design is way better than his original design. The next day, Gus bids Joey farewell and advises him to face his demons if he wants to get out of this place. Mr. Stevens brings her daughter Chloe to work at the Anderson house. Chloe captures Joey's attention throughout the meeting. In this meeting, Angelica explains what is next on the agenda. It was a concert that Joey was supposed to organize. Joey had to stage this concert in the Anderson barn. Proceeds from the concerts are to help war heroes and the frontline army men. Since Angelica is also part of the army, she knew the right people Joey can work with on this. In this meeting, the special singer for the concert, Maximilian, was introduced with the rest of the team. Maximilian and his team explained how they are so grateful to Miss Sally and her kindness towards them and the work they do, how she was so generous and how she extended a hand to help every time help was needed. They were excited to do this, to honor Miss Sally's wish to help men of war who give their lives for the peace that we enjoy. At the end of the breakfast, Maximilian requests Joey to give him a tour to the barn. Joey was hesitant but obliged. We later discover that it was in this barn that Joey's father committed suicide. During the barn tour, a bullet hole was seen and the memories returned to Joey, who excused himself, heading out to play with Chloe and asks Miss Kelly to come along. Joey's grandmother specifically placed this in place to help Joey heal and recover from his past. Angelica takes Joey and the rest of the team to visit some of the beneficiaries of this concert. Michael, one of the beneficiaries, had one desire: to dance with his wife again. Michael had lost his leg during the war. Joey checked on his arm strength and assured him he will dance with his wife again. On leaving the hospital, Joey was determined to make this concert a success. He also looked at the possibility of getting an artificial leg for Michael and the rest of the people who had missing body parts. Joey made posters and the rest helped him in spreading the word about the concert. A lot of hard work, Joey transformed the barn into a concert area. Joey's friends, coming in later to find the whole place transformed, they ask who the party is for. Joey informs his friends of the charity concert with singer Maximilian Swain. His friends got even more excited and asked if they can meet him. Joey promised to introduce them later after he's done working. The next day, the concert is fully packed. Everyone is having a good time. Joey and Kelly were having a moment until Joey's friends barged in right in the middle